So that is another area where it's imperative that we tie the savings to our policies and our strategies so that anybody can look at us quite openly and transparently and see, okay, we're doing this, and this is the reason why we're doing it, and we're communicating it well. So that's what I'm interested in, and I'm particularly interested in focusing on the exceptions, the really big things that we need to focus on, the structural things to make the changes, and that goes to this budgeting process.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Stewart.
I'll just be quick. Just on the homelessness, I just want to thank Councillor Casey and Councillor Quacks for a lot of the work that they do with the homeless. And I think I've mentioned before that Councillor Quacks does go up once a month with his family and they help the homeless. But I think we've really been let down by central government, and I think we really need to put the pressure on central government because there's a lot of homeless people out there that have actually got mental health issues. And I'd just like to just tell you, just very quickly, a mental health issue that in my own community, I had an elderly couple that lived just down the road from me, and they saw my car parked with my name on it, and they came and knocked at the door and said they had a problem, and it was a little bit outside of what I do for council. But anyway, what had happened, they were in their 80s and they had a son who had mental health issues, and they went through one of the mental health agencies in our community to see if they could have him put somewhere safe for the time being until his mental health came right. And because he wasn't able to sign, or he wasn't going to sign to say that he had mental health issues, they said they couldn't do anything for him. So anyway, a couple of weeks later, the agency rings the elderly couple, and they wanted to just follow up and find out what had happened to, with the son, how he was. And they said, well, actually, you're just a couple of days too late. They said, 2 days ago, we buried him. He'd committed suicide with his dog. So what I'm trying to say is that I think we can't really take all the responsibility. I think the government has to start taking a bit of responsibility, and I think we also have to make sure that the agencies take a little bit more responsibility, because how can a person who's got a mental health issue, a lot of them living rough in the street, how can they actually decide for themselves that they have a mental health problem? And I think Councillor Casey and Councillor Darby and everybody that's spoken about homelessness, they're quite on the money. That we do need assistance. And just one other thing, I think we have got a lot of churches that have for many years, over 100 years, some of them have been land banking in the CBD area, and they've been land banking waiting for a rainy day, and I think that, and I think I've said it before, but I think that rainy day has come. So I think between central government, local government, mental health agencies, I think we can do a lot for the homeless, and I think now is the time. And I think Councillor Darby's quite right. If we don't do it now, it's just going to get worse. So anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. That's a well-considered contribution. Councillor Newman.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Rating stability can't be achieved by undercooking renewals of infrastructure. Local utility infrastructure, local roads, local footpaths, stormwater assets, local parks and utilities. And I think that maintaining these services on a like-for-like basis doesn't necessarily translate into a comparable level of service for a growing community, because maintaining on a like-for-like basis assets that are sweating is a reduction in real terms over time for those assets in a growing community. And I don't believe that the ATAP project is necessarily going to resolve our renewals dilemma. We can't just simply discontinue our stewardship of local renewal of assets, because those assets are already developed. They are there for the existing communities of ratepayers, and those ratepayers deserve value for rates. The great challenge, Mr. Chair, is going to be to get the Crown to agree to hand over its taxing powers through a regional petrol tax or through a congestion charge. Crown is already a big contributor, and I don't believe that we're going to see anytime soon the Minister of Finance agreeing to a regional petrol tax. Maybe a congestion charge at some point in the future, but I'm personally sceptical about congestion charging until we address the issue of renewal of local assets. I'm very sceptical about the introduction of a charge for travelling en route when we haven't done the work necessary to provide a resilient alternative route for people who don't wish to pay that charge. And that is an issue that's going to affect outer suburban communities such as mine. I think the issue with us moving forward in terms of our relationship with the Crown needs to be based on transferring some work streams. One of those big step change roading projects is going to be Mill Road, and that's largely a roading project that's run through my ward, Mr. Chair, and it's going to be very difficult to fund. It's going to be very difficult in terms of its impact on existing community. And I don't think that that is a project that is even remotely within the scope of Auckland Council, Auckland Transport to do. I think that's a project that needs to be transferred to the Crown. We can't afford it. I think the Crown can, and I think the Crown has the capacity to do it. Moving forward, Mr. Chair, I'm actually quite comfortable in principle with the visitor levy, but I've spoken on the issue of its technical efficiency to minimise leakage. I think that's a point which officers will need to address. I'm sure they will. I'm interested in the targeted land rate, but as I've said previously on this point, there is a contradiction with our unitary plan. The regional policy statement and the future urban land supply strategy are both porous documents, and we can't expect to target land and not expect to discover that there will be a new incentive to develop that land sooner than we necessarily thought, potentially out of sequence with what we expected with the future urban land supply strategy, and beyond the scope of this council's balance sheet in terms of developing the new utility assets, and beyond the scope of the government's $1 billion housing infrastructure fund. Just on the living wage, I have to tell you that I am so embarrassed by the idea that we would have frontline staff, library staff, maybe staff working administrative roles, many of whom I suspect are young Māori and Pacifica staff who live in my ward or maybe live in communities like Otara or in Beach Haven or Glen Innes or Ranui, who work hard but who are well behind in terms of a hourly rate, an hourly wage that is fair or sustainable. So I am supportive of an initiative to address this. I haven't made comments about this prior to the election. I'm very comfortable with my advocacy, but I do want to also acknowledge and express my support for comments made by Councillor Simpson around the need to find operating savings.
About 30 seconds, Councillor Newman.
Maybe someone might give me a 1
Chairman,
minute
I'll move
I'm
an
happy to
extension
move.
of time.
Okay,
Second.
moved by Councillor Quacks, moved by seconded by Councillor Fletcher. All those in favour, and that's for 2 minutes. Thank you.
Aye.
I probably won't need that, but thank you. I just think it is, I think it's intellectually lazy to just vote to require $25 million of savings in a given year of the officers and then leave officers to it.
Yeah.
That's just not realistic. And so there is a need to go through a line-by-line bilateral exercise where you look below the headline savings and frankly look for and negotiate those savings, and the negotiations are going to have to be with the senior management. They're also going to have to be with the local boards, because the local boards will be affected by the
May be affected.
they may be affected. I suspect they will be affected As we cut further and further, we move beyond the efficiencies into the questions of opportunity costs for frontline services. And so they need to be identified and negotiated and agreed. And since I have expressed my support for the living wage, which won't be a cheap measure, I understand that there is a need to find savings to fund that and other measures that I support. So look, I'm quite relaxed about the work that we're going to have to do in order to drive the internal efficiencies. I think that's part of our governance. And I think that this is a good opportunity in the year preceding the long-term plan, Mr Chair, to foreshadow some of those longer-term debates, but also move forward on some of those commitments that the Mayor has outlined in his pre-election advocacy, and since he has a mandate, he has the opportunity to pursue that.
Thank you, Councillor Newman. So I'm just trying to get one bit of information to partly answer your first query, which is about renewals, and
Doesn't need to be now.
no, but just a reassurance. So. Okay. Just on the depreciation path, because it's really important that everyone understands the trajectory we're on that. So at the moment we're depreciating, 63% effectively, which is, I'm just trying to get the start figure, which could have been about 50 at amalgamation, 2010, but anyway, it doesn't matter. Let's just say it was 50, we're at 63. So the aim is we're going to be at 100% by 2022. So, I mean, what that basically means is we then have money set aside for everything for renewals of our asset base.
I've got pressure in my ward right now, and I'm sure...
I know that, but I mean, there are many councils around this country that have depreciation percentages that are putting away in kitty much lower than what we're doing. So,
comfort.
so we've got a pretty bold goal there, and that's not very far away. That's only 6 years away, and that will take a huge amount of pressure off the revenue from that we have to raise through rates come 2022. Right, we have Councillor Cooper, and that's the last person I've got indicating at the moment. Oh, Councillor Hill, Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you. Firstly, for me, I just find the whole process rather alarming, where the governors of Auckland and we get the proposal the same day as the press, a couple of days before we need to consider it, and I don't think that's helpful to good decision making. So I would hope that we get a bit of a heads up before the press next time. I find it really difficult as a group of people to digest this within a day or two, with all the media commentary before we've even got a chance to sit down and talk about it. So I don't think that's a great process. My thoughts on the living wage echo Councillor Denise Lee's thoughts, and I do think we need a proper, a really hard look at it, and we haven't been reported back about the really great work that's been done around our social equity principles since early 2014. It just hasn't come back to us, and so a lot of us don't understand the good work that has been done and the pathway. We were nearly there anyway, and now we're going to disrupt that, and that was all manageable. So that'll be an interesting report back. ATEED, I do have to say that the way we keep attacking our CCOs isn't really helpful. If we keep attacking ATEED, it is bringing huge amounts of revenue into Auckland, and that money employs people. That's so important. We've got to think about our actions and the flow-on effects. My other issue, second to last, the business differential. Yes, I understand it's a trade-off against the interim transport levy, but already in the LTP, last year, we extended out the time for the differential to come closer to residential. We already chopped that in half. This year we're putting it off. So 2 years running, we're basically not acting in good faith with our businesses. And I know that it's great headline news every time we go, oh, Sky City, the big boys, But we've got to remember that over 90% of our businesses are small to medium enterprises. And it's those mum and dad businesses, small businesses, our young people starting out. And they're often only paying themselves a small amount of money just to keep it afloat. They've taken the risk. And then again, we go, okay, we're just not going to help you. And so I think we've got to remember that. It's very easy to yell about the big boy next door, but that's one business. There's so many other small businesses that we need to help. So I'm hoping that this stopping it for 1 year isn't a precursor to, to just forgetting about it. So I'm going to be very vigilant at the LTP discussions next year. My last issue is waste, the rubbish. One of our core businesses that gets people really racked up. It's probably one of the most common communications that we all have is around the rubbish bags, picking it up, the cost, etc., etc. People have been waiting, it's now 6 years, we're into our 7th year of amalgamation, we still haven't got one consistent collection method. And everybody asks the same thing, when is it all going to happen? When are we all going to be the same? And still again, we're going to put that off yet again. And there are a lot of people, no matter how much you explain it, feel they're being disadvantaged in some areas against others. And so here we put it off again. So easy to put off, but actually one of the fundamentals that we're here to do. And so I'm really disappointed about that. I'm really disappointed that we're not going to composting, all that organic material to landfill. That won't make Councillor Wayne Walker very happy. More methane, more emissions. We're just not doing it.